I'm going to talk about a book I just wrote. I'm going to pass it around. I'm the worst book promoter you will ever meet. I've only bought one of my own book. That's it. Please don't steal it. Have it returned at the end if you don't mind. You can buy them on Kindle. So who's going to click for me? Okay. So I'll try to do this talk quickly. I can easily go an hour and a half and blab, but I'll try to keep it to 20-ish minutes. What I'm going to go through are 10 things you need to know about fundraising. And I used to do a lot of these VC panels where you get up and you say the things you want people to know about VCs so they will fit into your personal needs as a VC. These are things that maybe VCs don't want you to know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't care. But it's a little bit of a different angle in terms of the content. So hopefully you enjoy it. Most of the content you're going to see on the wall is useless. They're just crazy pictures. But I'll say something hopefully moderately intelligent as we go through. Okay, let's see if this works. Nope. All right, just quick background. Interplay, we incubate companies. So we'll literally start companies, recruit founders, launch it. We work with existing companies, get involved, and become kind of the consummate partner for the life of the company. It's a bit of a different model. We make some angel investments. If you're interested in getting involved with the company, you can fill out an application at the bottom of interplay.vc. We have a founder role. If you have a company, then you want to get involved. You're looking for help on fundraising, finding talent. You can read all about it. You can contact us there. We are going to probably be recruiting for some CTO roles soon, so lots of engineers in the room. Fill out the founder role. That's an important role. We have a lot of respect for that. The venture partner at High Peaks Venture Partners. It's a seed stage venture capital firm, about $75 million under management. Does anything internet, primarily focused on B2B and e-commerce. Had some big exits to Google and a bunch of other companies. You can check it out. Partners have terrific backgrounds. I won't bore you with all of it. And lastly is the book, which is going around. A little bit different of a book than what's out there around fundraising. So when I started out in VC, I watched a lot of terrifically brilliant, inspiring entrepreneurs come in and totally screw up the fundraising process and not raise money for a lack of talent or idea, but because they didn't know what they were supposed to be doing in the fundraising process. And that was crazy. That's just an inefficiency that shouldn't exist. So I started writing a blog as I was learning the business about the things they were doing wrong, as I was learning it from them, watching them make the mistakes. And through the process of writing, it forced me to structure my thinking. 5 years later, I had a best-selling author come in and basically chew me out for not making a book, and I gave him a whole talk about being anti-paper, I don't do any paper, and how I wasn't going to do a book, and he talked me into it. So after a year of pain, you have a book in front of you. The topic of the book is really a handbook for raising venture. It's not a stories of other founders. It's literally step 1, identify VCs. Step 2, how to prepare your materials. All the way through how to get the meeting, what to do in the meeting, all the way through the deal. It's 230 pages of that. If you need help sleeping, or if you're going to be raising money, it might be useful to you. And I'll give you a link you can find later. Okay, just to give you a sense, some companies I've been in, I don't know the number now, but it's probably something like 30 tech companies. The names that people probably know are like Warby Parker. If you're B2B or email, you'll probably know Sailthrough, which is doing terrifically well. Interplay is about 10 companies right now. I don't think all of them are up here. Services, B2B, B2C, it's everything under the sun. So kind of gotten to touch a lot of different things. A lot of people smarter than I am have shown me the way, so learned a lot, and hopefully some of the experiences will be useful. All right, let's jump into the story. So counting down, this is number 10. Told you, use these pictures, so as promised. First question is VC Pandora's box? And the first thing I want to just lead people with here is, everyone when they start a company says, okay, I got an idea, I'm going to build a team, I'm going to raise venture money. For most of you, that is a waste of time. Not because you're not good enough for venture money, but because venture money is not a fit for you, what you're doing. So the one thing I think I've given to the world in terms of a framework that's useful is on about page 31, 32 of the book. It's a 2x2 framework that articulates whether or not you should be raising venture money or bootstrapping. And the basic logic is this. If you're building a huge company that needs a lot of money, you need VC. If you're building a small company that doesn't take much money to build, bootstrap it or raise angel. Okay? If you're building a small company that takes a lot of money, don't do it. Okay? Okay? This is basic logic. I think it's helpful to you. The tweener is if you've got a big opportunity that doesn't need a lot of money. And then there's a third dimension, which is barriers. If you've invented a new type of dirt that can sell for billions and billions and billions of dollars to Exxon, Okay, and you've got it patented and no one else can do anything about it, don't raise a lot of money, own a lot of the company and build it. If you've got a website that is going to have a big network effect, doesn't necessarily take a lot of money to build the technology, it might take a lot of money to do sales, marketing, otherwise to get it out there, and you're in a land grab, raise venture. That's the framework. If you're interested in debating that with yourself or looking at the actual visual, you check out the book. It's on page 30-something. Okay? By the way, along the way, if you guys, we'll save questions for the end. Yeah, this is a useless picture as well. Debt versus equity. When people go out and are raising their first round, and only really at the seed round is a common place to discuss the concept of a convertible note. Okay, who in here knows what a convertible note is? Okay, if I may do the other way. Who doesn't know what a convertible note is? Okay, good. Convertible note is a debt structure, technically, meaning someone is lending you money that in theory you're going to pay back. In reality, you're not going to pay it back. What they're doing is they're lending you money, goes into your company, and there's an interest rate and everything applied. The expectation, though, is that it's going to convert into equity when you actually raise an equity round and sell shares of the company. If that doesn't make sense to you, talk afterward. So when the people go out to raise their seed round, the culture is that you can typically do a convertible note or an equity round in your first financing. After that, it's always an equity round for the most part, unless you haven't hit the milestones to get to the next big tranche of capital. And then you might do a note, which is not necessarily usually a good thing. So people will say, should I do a convertible note or an equity round for my first round? The benefit of a convertible note is you can defer all decisions around valuation, all decisions around how the control and the governance of the company, who gets to decide what, investors versus entrepreneurs. And it costs about $1 to $5 grand to get it set up. It's quick, it's easy, it's just a few pages of paper. Okay? If you do an equity round, you're talking 15 to 30K, you're going to have hundreds of sheets of paper, all the governance, all the decision making in the company is going to be defined. You've cleaned up the Companies Act, all the issues are worked out for the next investor. So you've gotten your house in order. So there's kind of pros and cons, there's not a right or a wrong. Here's how you think about it. The market for equity in startups, which is what you are selling when you're raising money, ebbs and flows. There's times where it's hot, and there's times where it's cold. When it's hot, valuations, prices go up. When it's cold, they go down. And there's also all the control provisions. They'll become more favorable to the entrepreneur in a hot market and less favorable out in bad markets. This is the way to think about it from my perspective. If the market's hot and your round is going relatively well, and there's also things that can be specific to your company, lock in today's price with an equity round. If it's a bad market, defer the valuation, defer the control provision discussion by taking in money via convertible note where that's not discussed till later. Okay, next slide. All right, venture math. Super confusing, right? What's your company worth? No one knows. So here's how people do the math, and you hear the equation when you go out and you start reading the stuff. It's directly behind me in small font that you can't read, and it says this. It says pre-money plus investment equals post-money, and probably a good chunk of you, if you've been around the financing game for one lap, you've heard that. And so pre-money means the value of your company by itself, before you take in any capital. Team, your market, your everything you've done, the product, what your company's worth today. Investment is what you raise. You add those together and you get a post-money valuation, the value of the company after the investment. Company's worth $5 million, you raise $5 million, it's worth 10 after. That's it, simple. Here's a problem. What the hell is your company worth today? And if you don't have any cash flows and you're thinking, God, I was a banker for so many years and we knew how to do this, we do discounted cash flow model, or we do multiples or whatever else, you're out of luck. Because your company probably hasn't even launched a product and it's probably pre-revenue and certainly pre-free cash flow. Okay? So what do? The calculus is actually pretty simple because investors don't deal with that. We think about it differently. For us, the value of your company is an output, not an input. Here's what we do. We figure out how much money you need to run the company to achieve the milestones you need to hit in the next 18 to 24 months. 12 months to hit milestones, 6 months to raise your next round of financing. Okay, so 18 months minimum. So you need $5 million in this scenario, just to keep it simple. There's a typical market norm for what VCs take in every given round. Not each individual VC, the syndicate, which means all of the investors together. And typically the fat part of the bell curve is around 20 to 25%. If your deal is less hot, you could be 30 or 40%. If your deal is really hot, extreme, you might be 10%. Okay? That's probably 3 standard deviations for people who are smart and understand math better than I do. and 40% is probably 3 on the other side. It hovers around 20, 25, kind of in the middle. So what VCs do is they say, how much money do you need? How much should the syndicate own? Your dilution, how much you're giving up? We divide. $5 million for 50% of the company, well, it's $10 million value after the round. Minus the investment, $5 million, means the company's worth $5 million today. That's how we do the math. Why that matters. When you go into a venture meeting and someone says, what do you think your company's worth? What valuation are you thinking? It's not actually about your valuation. It's, hey, we know how this works. We're raising this amount. You know, we know typical dilution's kind of in these ranges. Let's move on. Okay? Next slide. All right. 3 documents. If you're writing a 75-page business plan, stop. Stop it right now. Go for a long walk and relax. You don't have to do it. It's insane. I get one of those, I immediately am not interested in the company, and every other investor doing kind of long cycles and this stuff is as well, because it's a waste of time. It's doing too much work before you know anything about the business. There's 3 documents you need, and 3 documents only for the fundraising core process. A lot of other documents you'll use to run the business, which will be called upon during diligence. These are the documents. 1 page that describes your business. This is the bait. You don't need to say everything about your company on that 1 page. You just need to have enough for an investor to know this is a fit. Management team, okay, we got some bullets on where they used to work. It's a pain point I understand. They're in the right part of the country. We're going to include geography. How big is the market? How do they make money? Okay, usually goes in this order. Pain, solution, revenue, market, competition, team, milestones, or milestones team. That's what you usually write. It's 1 page. It's a teaser. They're not going to know what the hell your business is after. They're going to have a gist of a sense of it and think it probably is a fit, and then they're going to start emailing with you. That's it. Okay? If you send more than that, you're crazy. Okay? And your projections are almost worthless. Don't even bother. Okay? Not even include them. The second document you need is you need 10 to 20 slides to describe the business. The same exact topics, but the goal is when you present that to someone, they actually know the answers to kind of most of the things around those topics, not just a teaser. Okay? So you want 10 to 20 slides to do that. The third document is an operating model. Operating model, not financial model. If you're a banker and you're thinking, okay, we'll do accruals and all this fancy accounting stuff, forget about it. You're going to do sources of cash, so revenue, and uses of cash, expenses. 1 column for each month for 60 months, and you're going to show how you actually build a business through the numbers by unearthing the assumptions. Here's a good example. We're going to hire a sales guy. He's going to do 8 calls a day. He's going to convert X% of those. The average sales price is going to be this. This is the revenue. And also because we hired that sales guy in September, we're going to start seeing an expense around his salary, his desk, and everything else in September. And if you bake it all down to the granular inputs, an investor can look at it and say, do we believe in that conversion rate or not? And if we believe in that conversion rate, then we should believe in, we believe in all the inputs, we should believe in the output. And the output tells them a couple of things. 1, it's kind of a makeshift version of projections out of cash. But 2, it tells them how much money they need, you need for the business to go 18 to 24 months, which is what they're really focused on. Okay, cool? All right, investors have ADD. They see a lot of companies, okay? And their goal, I just blogged about this, is to get to know as quickly as possible. And there's good reason for it. If they spent an hour with every company that reached out to them, they would never make any progress. They probably wouldn't even see the company that they want to invest in. So the goal is to find the most likely reason why you're not going to invest. Not to be mean, but just to get to an answer so you can spend your time with the ones where you're not going to get to know. And a mentor of mine told me the goal is to get to know, and when you can't get to know, you've got to yes. Okay? So we're not looking for the company to invest in. We're looking to say no to every company, and then when we can't, we should probably be investing in that. Okay? So that's the VC mindset. So when you get into the room with the VC, they're going to start asking you rapid fire questions if they think you're not going to tell them the answers on the things that will get them to know quickly. And the problem with that is the way you're going to sell things, what humans buy is we buy narratives, we buy stories, we don't buy products. So you need to tell a narrative about your company. So if someone interrupts you and starts asking you all these questions, you can't really tell a story. So here's what I think helps placate that dynamic and allows you to deliver the narrative. Instead of starting with an agenda slide saying we're going to do market size, we're going to cover competition, which tells them that you know what they need to hear, but doesn't tell them the answer to those questions, tell them all the answers. One slide, all the same topics. Instead of market size, say $2 billion addressable market. 10 years of management experience in space. Give them the answers to all those topics, and hopefully they can say, wow, this is a fit for my thesis. The person knows what I need to hear. I just need to chill out and let them convince me or not be convinced in order to make a decision. Won't work with everybody, but it gives you a better chance of delivering your narrative, which means you have a better chance of actually selling your equity. Culture drives structure. So we live in a world where cultural norms are used as subtle navigation signals. There'd be a lot of confusion if we didn't always drive on the right side of the road, right? There's culture around it. VCs have no idea, nor do entrepreneurs. No one really knows what a fair deal is, okay? So what happens over 40, 50 years of venture capital is there's evolved typical structures for how investments are done, which generally protect both sides for different scenarios. But that doesn't mean everything isn't negotiable. Everything is negotiable. So the point I want to leave you with this, just a very simple concept, is that in kind of a foggy world, the cultural structure is actually a beacon of light to help everyone get to what is considered a fair deal. But if there's something you really care about and you have leverage, you can negotiate on it. Okay? So don't think you have to go in and just take the stock terms. If you've got a lot of interest, you might negotiate 5 things. If you've got a good bit of interest, you might negotiate one thing you really care about. And if you've got no interest, you take what you get. Next one. Fundraising is like dating, and there's a lot of parallels here, and I usually sneak a peek at my notes on the slide on this one. But the parallels are very strong, and when you think about dating, there's a lot of dynamics, and for those of you who have dated longer than others, you're probably going to be very good at fundraising. So here's the thing, like it's a psychological game, and that is a fundamentally different perspective. It's a fundamentally important perspective to have when you get into this process. Some truths about it, some parallels. One, some things are universally more attractive. Some companies, right? Bigger market size, right? A lot of other parallels you could draw there that would have people comment, okay? But that said, people have different types of interests, right? So even if you have what is universally considered by most people to be in a very attractive company, you're probably still going to hear no. So you need to be ready for that. Even if, when I went out for my last raise in the last company, almost everyone said yes, but it was still painful as hell to hear no from folks who said it. Okay? So just like dating, you can be the hottest thing in the room and someone's still going to reject you. Okay? So be ready for it. But the other thing that I'd leave you with is that everyone wants what they can't have in dating, and the same is true for startups, for investing. Okay? So it's important to be signaling to folks throughout the fundraising process that you are a highly sought after company. Other people are interested. Okay? There's ego, there's jealousy, there's all these things that come into it. And so how do you do that, and is that nice or is that mean? I would argue there's an easy way to do it that's very respectful and beneficial to everybody. When an investor gives you signal and moves you forward in the process, and that might be calls you in for a meeting, it might be calls you in for a partner meeting, it might be signals going to give you a term sheet or gives you a term sheet. I recommend you call every other investor in a nice way and say, hey, I want to keep you in the loop. We're expecting a term sheet from another investor. We'd love to get a term sheet from you guys. We'd love to work with you. Can we move forward? And you might think, wow, it feels kind of crappy to go out and make them feel like they're competing with each other. But if you're an investor, you'd much rather know that you're falling behind in the process than find out 2 months later that the deal got done and you never got a call. So it's actually respectful, and what it'll end up doing is helping to drive everyone forward in the system. Let's keep going. So I recommend people consider doing a multi-step fundraise if you're tight on cash. And so that means whether it's a 2 or a 3-step, change my language on this sometimes, consider raising a convertible note to get cash in the business at the same time you're actually raising your equity round. Because one of the things that can happen is you don't want to be an entrepreneur who's run out of money, is desperate to get a deal done, and therefore will give in on terms you shouldn't be giving on. So if you can raise a convertible note a few $100,000, which buys you 6 to 9 months at your lean current operating rate, You go out and you raise the bigger $1 million, the convertible note rolls into that. 2 months later, 3 months later, it gives you the flexibility to take your time and negotiate, which is important. Okay? And that allows you to raise slow. It's okay for you to receive a commitment from an investor, them to say, hey, we're in, and for you to say, thank you, we're not reciprocating our commitments right now, but we're really excited that you're interested in this, we'll be keeping you in the loop. Okay? They're going to get really nervous. You're going to probably lose sleep or you're going to lose them. But if you got the guts for it, it allows you to get a little bit more market intelligence before you lock up a deal. And allows you to see, okay, all right, we need 10 investors to fill out the round, and now I've got 15 who have expressed interest because I waited, and I can pick the 10 that are going to help me the most. So there is a lot of value to raising slow if you've got the guts for it. But it's scary, nerve-wracking, and hard as hell, but it pays off. And if you wait, you'll get what I call a pileup. Another mentor of mine who taught me a little bit about the business very early on had this great phrase. He said, everyone in venture loves to be first to be second. I'll let you unravel that for a second. Every investor loves to be first to be second, which means no one wants to be first, but once everyone else is invested, they want in too. Here's why. No one knows what they're doing. Think about it. The best VCs out there have a 1 in 3 hit rate on a big win. The best. Okay? It's a hard business. And so when someone else who's smart, they have a lot of respect for, validates the idea by giving a term sheet, it makes that VC who is doubting themselves or thinking about the company it's kind of like where they lost money last time, think, wow, okay, someone else smart likes this too. It's that much sexier, it's that much more appealing, and again, it's like dating. So what ends up happening is you need to get that one investor in, but when you do, you might get a lot. And so the kind of the way to think about it is you might be wandering through a very dry desert for a very long time, hopelessly wandering, only to find an oasis in the distance that suddenly leads to a flash flood. Okay? And so if you hang out a little bit longer after you've got a term sheet, you might get 5. Okay? And that will be to your advantage. Okay? The last one, this is actually a different approach. So there's really 2 ways to raise money. And until now, I've been giving you 10 fairly boring slides on tactics to help you kind of negotiate a great deal. And position and jockey and beat people up and do business the tough way. It's not actually how I do it personally. I find a company I really like, entrepreneur I want to work with, maybe their partner. I do something I call the expression of love. I say to them, you're freaking cool. The company's awesome. Want to work together? They say yes, and I say, cool, are you down to stop talking to other people and just do a deal? We'll do a fair deal. And you're kind of throwing your hat in the ring, and they're kind of saying, yeah, you might be giving up a little negotiating leverage. I think people end up getting better deals in that environment, and they end up with stronger relationships with their now partner. When I do a deal, I usually sit down, go through a term sheet, explain every term to the entrepreneur. I'll say to them, hey, this is what's VC favorable, this is what's entrepreneur favorable, here's the middle. Cool? There's not a lot of stuff to actually negotiate. These things have been baked over 50 years. There's like 4 things, and usually they're market norms given the dynamic in the market at the given time. There's not a lot to it. So you can jockey the whole way through, and you can do all the things I just told you about, which you will need to do with most people, so you should be prepared to do them. But, just like in dating, if you have that opportunity to have that love connection, be ready for it. Because it can totally transform the way you do your business, the stress. I think typically it takes about a week to negotiate a term sheet. I usually do it in like 2 hours. Kind of high five on the way out, and it's done. That's how you can do business if you want to. Now the problem is, just like in dating, last parallel, you can offer an expression of love and be rejected. A lot of people don't do this. So be careful, but be aware that there's 2 strategies you should kind of have in your playbook at all times. And I lied. There is one more slide. The last one was 0, so I kind of lied twice. I think with all of this, so I just remind you, it's the startup ecosystem, not even venture capital, the startup ecosystem is a high volume, multi-period game. You're going to deal with a lot of people over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Be respectful. Don't put all of your reputation in one interaction on one business. Try to keep relationships where you can. And a lot of investors don't do this, a lot of entrepreneurs don't do this. But the people who do many companies, have great relationships, get support when they need it. It's super valuable. Sometimes it's really hard. Just try to keep a little bit of distance from the emotions. Just do business. Okay? Next slide. So this is the book, a whole bunch of stuff on the side. My favorite quote is from a guy named Julian Smith, who's a best-selling author who actually just raised, and I sent him an early copy of the book. And he gave me communication UX as a quote. This is very clear, and that's what the book is. It'll help you sleep because it's so direct and boring, but it's very tactically straightforward. And I'm the worst book promoter. I don't do really book sightings or any of this stuff. This is probably the only promotion I do, and I just have to get out to speak. You flip to the next slide. And if you want to find me, I'm on Twitter at NPD. I also blog a lot at npd.me. And that's it. I think we do questions. Cool. Hopefully that was helpful.
There's 3 documents, summary, slide deck, and then operational summary.
Operating model. Excel document. It's Excel.
How did that differ from a projection?
It ends up being a projection, but what the operating model should tell the people who are investing is how you build your business. The output is important because it means, yeah, it's going to be a big company if you believe in the inputs. But it says how. Are you going to do marketing or sales? Well, if you show all the metrics that drive revenue, I'm going to know. How much are you spending? When are you spending it? When are you hiring these people? Forcing yourself to do that. That is actually the 90-page business plan in one Excel sheet. It's the operating model. Very, very useful. Good exercise for entrepreneurs. I think if you do it right, it will be something you continue to update and use. And it'll teach you a little bit about how you're thinking about the business and force you to make resource decisions early on. But it's a little bit different. It's all about cash. Literally, force yourself to do it in one sheet. Do not have 3 assumptions baked into one cell. Every assumption is a row, so it unearths all of the thinking in the business. 1 column per month, 60 months. Net cash at the bottom. Go.
The barriers to entry now are so low to start a web or a mobile company. Can you give an idea of what's the difference in terms of possibility of raising money for a sketch on a napkin up to, I've got a site that's been running for 6 months, here's all the metrics?
You can raise, so the question is, if I'm hearing it right, can you raise on just a napkin, or do you need a product and market? Is that right, fair?
Well, what are the odds, percentages?
Yeah, I don't know the percentages. It depends on you. If you're an entrepreneur who's been around the block and done it a few times, you can probably raise on a napkin. And sometimes raising on the promise is a lot easier than raising on the metrics. But if you're first time go, unknown quantity to the person you're raising from, you probably need a product and market. That seems to be the norm. But you can do that kind of before you've been in market long enough to have any metrics to tell anything. Now, on the I would say the answer actually varies a little bit. B2B, where the pain points are easier to understand through diligence, customer calls and otherwise, it's a lot easier to raise in the promise. B2C is increasingly, right now, there's a little bit of B2C I think is a little more challenging than it was 12 months ago to raise on. You need to have a little bit more, typically more of an adoption curve to demonstrate that it's a good idea. Because they kind of both address the same thing. B2C, the pain point is only kind of demonstrated through adoption, or addressing the pain points demonstrated through the adoption. B2B, you can understand it through conversations as an investor. So B2B, I think is a little bit easier to raise.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's a separate tangent. Like one of my friends is in the Silicon Valley, so he's raised a lot of capital. The question is, when do you accept failure?
When do you accept failure?
At the start, basically, that you've raised too much money, you should not raise the next one. You should just give up and move on to a new company.
That's a hard question. There's probably 1,000 ways to figure it out, and 1,000 ways to ignore and deny it. But the key is, I think, I don't have an answer to that, because there's I don't know, there's too much nuance to it. The best thing I'd say to people is, go in accepting that failure is an okay outcome. It's totally fine. Everyone fails. And when you do, you learn a bunch of stuff, and it makes you more backable. It's not embarrassing.
Is it a hot market now or not?
I think right now is a relatively good market. I think it's a market in favor of the entrepreneurs right now. So if you're choosing between note or equity round, stamp it in equity round. That's my vote.
I'm still finding, though, that I'm from the Philadelphia region. I'm still finding, though, that seed money is really difficult here. I mean, absurdly difficult.
Okay.
I almost need to have a significant traction before typical investors will look at here. Now, you might get angel, maybe.
I think it varies by region. I think in the New York and the Valley, my sense is there's an abundance of seed money. And the reason being is capital requirements have declined. People raised funds which have, 3 to 5 year investment horizons against deploying a lot of Series A investments. Can't get into them. And so they're going after seed deals. And so it's overfunded. I think that surplus of capital is actually declining now and normalizing. But you heard the Series A glut, or I think that was, my thesis on thinking on it is not that there's a shortage of Series A's, that there was too many seats because we were overfunded relative to the cash requirements of the companies. And the change wasn't the capital and market, it was the need for capital from the companies.
Is the geographical constraint changing? In other
I
words-
think it's democratizing. I think you can be an entrepreneur increasingly anywhere, but it's not an even playing field yet. There's regions that are up and coming. LA is kind of coming out of the blue, and DC's picking up, and things are kind of growing all over in different areas. And you're seeing accelerators pop up all around the country, frankly, all around the world. I think this is a global phenomenon around entrepreneurship. But if you're having trouble raising money where you are, get on a train, get on a plane, get the money. Got to build your business.
Travis.
Beautiful. Just wondering, can you talk very briefly about what goes into your decision-making process? I mean, do you decide whether a deal feels good or not in 5 minutes, or do you, kind of take that approach over a series of meetings?
So it differs by investor. Some people are really prudent in doing their diligence. Other people shoot from the hip. And I'll say, thank God my partners at High Peaks are prudent. I go on gut, and for me I know in an hour, usually know in 30 minutes that I'm pretty interested in it. Now then I go out and try to disprove it, be diligent about it. But the right type of person for the role, a story that just makes sense, the right type of skills at the table, a real pain point, a way to make money, usually you can figure that out. And if it just clicks, you're like, oh, why would we not do this one? And that doesn't happen often. But when it does, you're like, wow, it's exciting. This is a great company.
If I could just jump in with a follow-up, then what's the, not those, sure there's one, but what is the main thing that somebody can do that's going to immediately stop the process or turn you off or any investor?
There's not one. There's not one. In the book, I've got a section on don'ts. And that took me it took me a year of watching a bunch of people make a lot of don't mistakes, and it's things like, don't read your presentation for an hour. See, I've seen that done. Don't do it. No, there's hundreds of things that you can do. I mean, look, having normal social etiquette, understanding a normal business meeting, most of that stuff goes away. Common mistakes people make that are dings, that just show a little bit of weakness on the team, is a lot of people confuse market size with addressable market. Market size is the sum of all revenue in a space. Addressable market is the revenue your company would generate if it captured 100% of the market. Distinction being, you're Warby Parker, you bring down the prices of glasses. If you sell every pair of eyeglasses out to the world, well, you shrunk the market. So your addressable market's actually a fingerprint unique to your company. The market size is amalgamation of everything else out there. That's a common mistake. So a beverage company comes in, oh, there's $80 billion spent on beverages. Okay, you're an energy drink. So what subset is relevant to you, and what's your price point relative to the others, and what's the volume? It's that math. It's really easy to do. It just shows an understanding of thinking about your business the right way. That's just one example. It's another question where I don't know, there's a bunch of stuff. If you're interested in that, that's in the book. I won't remember it. Not trying to push the book, but I actually can't remember stuff. Other questions? Did I sufficiently bored? Oh, not everyone's bored yet.
Two questions into one. One is, We've heard a lot that valuations in the Valley are much higher than the valuation of companies over here for seed rounds. Is there any truth to that? And secondly, you definitely need 2 co-founders or more to get any sophisticated capital.
First question was, their valuations high in the Valley? They might be. That data's probably out there. And if they are, it's so liquid now because entrepreneurs are always going back and forth. We never talk to a company that's not going out the Valley as well, and vice versa, I'm sure, at this point. Or I can't imagine if there was a gap, I'm sure it's closing. Maybe it's not closed. Second question is, do you need 2 founders to start a company? No, you need a full team. And a full team means, you know, if you're delivering a web product, you probably need a CEO and a CTO, and that's it. Okay? Do they have to be a founder? Does it have to be 2? Is it possible one guy walks in and can do both? Yeah. But yeah, being alone, it's a lonely gig doing a startup. You could be the only founder, but you need to have kind of wrapped yourself a little bit to raise the seed round. For friends and family, maybe you don't need to have had that. Just depends. Let's this guy's asked yet.
The short version of my question is, to what extent is humility on the part of an entrepreneur a strength or a weakness when it comes to things like exploring possible revenue models, but not necessarily being certain when you approach an investor? Do you see that as a strength?
It's definitely a strength, and every investor will say we like when people say they don't know, or they give their perspective on it and it's honest. There is a point of underselling where I've seen people be too concerned about being salesy. Most of you probably wouldn't say this to you because they want to encourage you to be more in that direction. But I have seen people say, well, we really have no idea, you know, and they're just playing it down too much. When the reality is they have a plan. There's 3 ways we can do it. This is the thing we think is most likely, and they'll undersell. So what I recommend you do is just give it straight. What's the plan? We're not sure between these 3. Our intuition is here, and this is why. That's the perfect answer. But if you know any way to validate it, or who we should be talking to, or this is what we're doing, perfect. But do you have to have everything figured out at the seed stage? No, and if you think you do, you're crazy.
What's the longest amount of time? If somebody came in with an idea, you know, the next Facebook or whatever, something that's going to be super cool, but it's not going to produce revenue for a number of years, what's the longest amount of time you'd be willing to accept for a company was going to produce revenue?
Depends on the company. If the company was already showing an exponential growth curve, and it was obvious that it was going to create part of the web or part of an industry, I think people would go a very long time. But usually people don't have the exponential growth curve in the beginning with that. That's still on the promise. And usually the pain point or what they're addressing isn't unique or interesting enough to justify that. So it's typical to go a year or 2, but if you're asking, would you back a plan where it was 10 years out and you would start thinking about revenue? It would be pretty extreme on, wow, idea's really, really compelling, and they're already doing some crazy stuff in adoption. For me, and there's a lot of dials on what people will look at. There's investors who love all that stuff all the time. I'm probably in the middle, and there's people who would never do it. And that's the same thing about dating, like I said before. There's things that are universally more attractive, but everyone does kind of have their preferences.
What's the best way to get in front of investors like you?
Best way is to be a person. Contact them. Like, don't do anything creepy. A lot of creepy stuff going on. No creepy. Tweet at somebody. I mean, it's so easy. Respond to a blog post. Have a friend. I'm connected to a good billion people on LinkedIn. Have a friend introduce. You know, who cares? It's easy. Getting in's easy now. It used to be, I call it VC 1.0, this like ivory tower model, only you have to sneak in through a warm relationship and then we will talk to you. And now it's what I call VC 2.0. It's like we're marketing to you and hey, this is where we are. First round sending videos around and, you know, hey, make sure to show it to us before you show it to everyone else. Different game. Getting in front of someone's easy. If you send a mass email to all the partners, this is in the notes section. Don't do that. Don't copy 60 VCs on the email. You can imagine all of the obnoxious things that happen that make you feel belittled as a human being. Yes. Please don't do that. Just be a nice person. That's it. It's easy.
When you're a young startup with a lot of people that don't have, 10 startups under them and they're very inexperienced, what suggestions would you give when you're going into seeding and capital?
Get mentorship. So when you're building your team and building the business, get mentorship. Bring on advisors who will actually help you. Emphasis on the second part, who will actually get involved. And make sure you're helping yourself avoid a lot of the common pitfalls. Most of the stuff entrepreneurs do has been done 10,000 times before. And most of us make the same mistakes that everyone made before us. So find people who have seen some of those bumps and say, hey, swerve.
I don't mean to embarrass you, but I've become a fan of yours.
That's awkward. Creepy, we talked about creepy.
But I came here specifically to meet you, as I'm sure many people did. I'm in the fundraising process right now.
Yeah.
I actually have a few meetings lined up with some angel funds and some VCs.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, I read your bio and I've read actually one of your partners, Benson's
Sure.
bio. And he's been in the effort market and space. So wanted to humbly request 2 minutes of your time after this.
Even better, just contact me. You can get me on LinkedIn, you can send me a full email and I'll exchange with you. But yes, I'm happy to talk to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks.
But you can get more, anyone here, you have something where you're like, okay, we're ready to raise money or whatever. Find me on my blog, there's a contact button, takes you to LinkedIn. I paid to have LinkedIn open so anyone can any me.
He did the expression of love right up front.
I like it. Did not get rejected. We're going on a date. Okay. Any more questions? We got a guy in front here.
Do you know how, or what is your feeling about hardware and software projects? How many are funded?
Different investors for different things. It has to do a lot with the fund dynamics. If you're doing hardware, typically you have to have larger funds in order to get a big enough portfolio and have meaningful positions in the companies. So typically you'll see people with more assets under management doing those companies because they're more capital intensive. I don't know the number. Those numbers are available on the NVCA, National Venture Capital Association website. You can get all the splits. You can probably get the valuation breakdown. There's a good bit of public data on that website, nvca.org, I'm pretty sure.
Are investors wary of e-commerce right now?
No, it's become hot again. High Peaks does primarily B2B and e-com.
Mark, as an investor, I'm sure when you're investing in an idea or you think that an idea is great for investment, I'm sure that there are similar investors like you in other parts of the globe who might be thinking the same, and there might be duplications, right? How do you control that risk of an idea not getting duplicated in five different ways?
My theory is they come in threes. And if you've only seen one or two of the companies doing the same thing, you know there's another guy out there. It's part of the business. The good thing is, it's really hard to build a company, even if you have the right idea. So if we've got the right team, and we've capitalized it, we're making sure it has the right people around it, odds are it's going to be competitive. And the other good thing is we're betting on it's probably a huge market where it's okay if there's a couple winners. You still want to be the biggest, but as long as we make money, that's what it's about. We got to give returns. VCs have this mindset they have to give returns back to their investors, just like entrepreneurs are thinking about. But they think about, everyone's thinking about themselves in the process as well, of course. Go ahead.
Question is, would you invest in a firm if the founder is doing a day job?
Usually at the point of investment, they quit. So if the question is if there's a team that's not full-time yet, and they come to the table, the language usually is, hey, we're 1, 2, 3 people, we're off doing this. We've gotten to this point, we're ready. We need some money to quit, but we're all in, we're going to do it. That's usually chill. It's people are investing in where the puck is going, not where it is. But if you're not going to quit and no one's going to run it, find a team.
So, as a startup company, when we are trying to promote our product, so one of the strategies we are trying to use is offer our services for free for many of our clients to get them started with our product. So, as an investor, how would you find a startup company giving the product for free for an initial period compared to we charge them a fee and then
The question is it okay to give away your product for free, or do you need to be charging out the gate? And it just depends on what the product is. It's always really nice to see validation if people are willing to open a wallet. But there are businesses where you do trial periods, especially big enterprise. Usually the bigger the customer, the bigger the hurdle on trial and stuff like that.
What's the expectation that an entrepreneur should have that the VC how much time is a VC going to put into spending time with the entrepreneur and his team?
This is a dirty secret. So it's it depends on the fund and the company. The reality is that for most of the venture business, the way the model is set up for the VCs, they generally have an economic incentive to do more companies, which means less time per company. So what you have to go out and do is think about how many companies the firm invests in per year, and how many, the ratio of kind of companies to partner. Those are good metrics to get a sense for how involved they really get. And it varies a lot by firm, a tremendous amount. So, I mean, this is actually what we talk a lot about on the High Peak side. At Interplay side, when we get involved with the company, we talk to the person every day. But it's not a venture firm. It's a different model that allows that. I mean, I'm texting people and helping them write emails to investors and really involved, okay? On the venture side, we are far more involved than average. I'm not just saying that. We're talking about bringing in an in-house recruiter. We're doing stuff that is a little different to make sure we're adding value. And it's not because we want for marketing, it's because we want our companies to kill it. We've already made the bet. We want those to win. And so we are a more concentrated venture fund in terms of our investing. We'll do fewer deals, put more money in relative to our assets per deal.
One more, last one.
Does it matter if the development team is abroad?
I'm conflicted. So one of the Interplay companies is a dev shop in Argentina. So I want to tell you that no one cares about offshoring, but the reality is traditionally the venture answer has been offshore dev is bad. Okay. That said, I will say that I actually think this is a macro trend that is changing. It's in the relatively early days of it, but the company that I work with called DevSpark, it's run by a guy who was a CTO and a CEO. I backed him at DFJ. He sold his company to Techstars Cloud Mentor, and he's running a dev shop with guys in Argentina. So he's one of us out doing this thing in the field. He is working with a number of startups backed by some of the biggest name venture funds. It is becoming more commonplace for two reasons, I think. One, the engineering shortage in major startup communities. And then two, I think with the communication technology that's in place now, it's just so easy to do remote. If they're going to be in a different town or a different state, they may as well be in South America, right? Where you're in the same time zone and whatnot. So I think the answer is, I've seen a lot of companies come in recently, and I haven't heard the cringe that I would have expected. The one nuance is, I think it's still a very good best practice to have the CTO in-house, overseeing and making sure the architecture is being done. Otherwise, they're totally flying blind. But we have recently funded a seed deal where all of the dev work was being done in Vietnam. And I would have said 3 or 4 years ago, hell no, that ever happening. So I think that is actually becoming acceptable now. The global economy is actually becoming accepted for its global nature. I think
Last one.
Sorry, catch you back to it.
In your view, is there any particular stigma to academic startups?
What does that mean? Selling into universities?
Well, yeah, more so spin-offs from universities that are usually funded or founded by research faculty.
No, I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it's all about, you're judged against the same criteria. I don't think there's, if you come from a research background, if you're the right guy, great. I don't think there's an issue with that. If you haven't been in the business world, make sure, I was talking to some guy before this. One exercise I encourage everyone to do is take an Excel sheet out, write down all the skills you need to build a company. Skills. Well, we need really good design. For this business, we need a lot of SEO. And be honest and check the boxes on the things you're good at. Then go out and find people who are good at the other things. Then raise your money. That's it. It's usually the whole skills in the company come down to 10 things that really matter and are going to drive value. Make sure you have those at the table. And if you've been a lifelong researcher, which I don't know your story, and you've never been in a business negotiation or done BD, well, great. You probably know the customer, you're in the right role. Make sure you have a partner who complements some of those skills. You may be the domain expert and the product expert. That's terrific. You need that. That's on that list. No one's Superman. Make sure to find a good partner or partners, or whatever it is. And they can be advisors. They could be employees. But you want to make sure one way or another you've checked every box. Cool. Thank you everyone for your time.